Beneath the stone floor of an Egyptian temple is a passage so narrow that anyone entering must lower their head, turn sideways, and descend into complete darkness. There is no royal coffin inside, no mountain of gold, no entrance to a lost city. Instead, the walls are covered with hieroglyphs, showing strange sacred objects, divine figures, ceremonial boats, and a serpent emerging from a lotus inside an enormous oval form. For centuries, people have argued over what these carvings mean, but the hieroglyphs provide an answer. The pharaohs were hiding something beneath the temple, not because it was forgotten, and not simply because it was valuable. They hid it because ordinary people were never supposed to see the gods before the priests were ready to reveal them. This is the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, one of the best preserved temple complexes in Egypt. It stands near the Nile, north of Luxor, on a site that had been sacred for thousands of years. The enormous stone temple visible today was largely constructed during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, when foreign rulers governed Egypt but continued to present themselves in the traditional role of pharaoh. Its exterior is monumental. Massive columns rise above the entrance. Faces of the goddess Hathor look down from their capitals. Inside, the ceiling is covered with stars, constellations, and images of the heavens. Most visitors look upward, but the temple's most secret spaces are below their feet. Hidden beneath the floors and inside the thick stone foundations is a series of small crypts. Some are reached through low openings that could easily be overlooked. Others lie beyond rooms that were already closed to most of the population. These were not public halls. They were concealed spaces inside the most restricted part of a sacred building. If buried chambers and forgotten inscriptions are why you're here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the first clue on these walls reveals that the crypts were not empty tunnels. They were built to protect a collection that has almost completely disappeared. The carvings inside show divine figures in precise forms. Sacred vessels appear beside them. Ceremonial objects rest on platforms. Gods stand inside shrines or upon ritual boats. The inscriptions name many of these figures and connect them with specific religious roles. That matters because the reliefs may represent objects that were once physically stored inside the chambers. The accepted explanation is that the crypts served as protected treasuries or warehouses for valuable ritual equipment. They may have held ceremonial tools, sacred emblems, festival objects, and images of the gods. The chambers were small, which makes it unlikely that large public ceremonies happened inside them. Their purpose appears to have been protection and concealment. But the carvings suggest something more than ordinary storage. They form an inventory made from stone. The physical collection is gone. Precious metal could be melted down. Wood could decay. Statues could be stolen, destroyed, moved, or buried. But the walls remained. They still show the shapes of objects that once belonged to the temple. The pharaohs left behind a record of what had vanished, and among the most important objects stored at Dendera may have been sacred images of Hathor and the gods connected with her cult. To understand why those images were hidden, we have to forget the modern idea that a statue is only a statue. In ancient Egyptian religion, a divine image could become the physical center of a god's presence during ritual. The stone, wood, or metal object was created by human hands. But after preparation and ceremony, it could function as a vessel through which the deity entered the temple. Priests washed it. They clothed it. They presented food, incense, oils, jewelry, and offerings before it. They did not treat the image as decoration. They treated it as a body. That changes the meaning of everything beneath Dendera. If the crypts held divine images, then the priests were not simply locking valuables in a basement. They were concealing the physical forms through which the gods appeared. And the hieroglyphs explain why concealment was necessary. Ancient Egyptian temples were built through layers of access. The outer areas were closer to the human world. Deeper chambers became increasingly sacred. The sanctuary at the center belonged to the god. Ordinary worshippers could gather near temples, pray, leave offerings, participate in festivals, and sometimes witness sacred processions. But they were not free to walk into the innermost rooms. Only authorized priests could approach the divine image, and even they had to follow purification rules. They washed, they wore clean clothing, they avoided certain foods and activities, they entered according to rank and duty. The temple was not designed to welcome everyone equally. It was designed to separate, outside from inside, human from divine, visible from hidden, and the crypts were concealed beneath rooms that were already inaccessible to most people. They represented another layer below the sacred center, but the object stored there did not always remain underground. This is the second clue. At major festivals, sacred images could be taken from their hidden resting places and carried through the temple in processions. At Dendera, celebrations connected with Hathor involved movement through the building and toward the roof. During the New Year festival, a divine image was brought upward to encounter the first light of the renewed sun. The journey was carefully controlled. The sacred object began in darkness. Priests prepared it away from public sight. They adorned it. They placed it inside a shrine or ceremonial boat. Then they carried it through the temple and upward. Only after this hidden preparation could the goddess appear. To the people outside, the moment may have seemed sudden and miraculous. Hathor emerged in procession, surrounded by music, incense, movement, and ritual. But below the visible ceremony was an invisible system. The image had been stored. The priests had entered. The object had been awakened. The procession had been timed. The appearance of the goddess was not random. It was produced through sacred order. This is why the underground location mattered. Below the temple represented darkness, stillness, concealment, and potential. The roof represented sky, sunlight, rebirth, and revelation. The entire building transformed the hidden image. It moved from darkness into light, from silence into music, from secrecy into public vision. Then it returned. The cycle repeated because divine power was not meant to remain exposed. It had to be hidden before it could be revealed again. One carving inside the crypts has become more famous than all the others. It shows a serpent emerging from a lotus flower and extending inside a large oval shape. A jed pillar appears nearby, supporting part of the scene. Human figures stand around it. To modern eyes, it can resemble a huge glass bulb with a cable and electrical components. This resemblance created the theory of the so-called Dendera light. According to the most extreme version, ancient Egyptian priests possessed electricity. They used giant lamps to illuminate underground chambers without smoke from flames. The carvings were supposedly a technical diagram hidden beneath the temple. It is an extraordinary claim, but that explanation has a problem. The hieroglyphs do not describe an electrical device. They identify the serpent as a form of Harsomtus, a divine figure connected with Horus and the newborn sun. The lotus was one of Egypt's most powerful symbols of creation. It rises from water and opens in sunlight. In creation traditions, the first light could emerge from a lotus rising out of the primeval waters. The serpent represents the god, appearing at the beginning of creation. The oval surrounding it belongs to the symbolic and ritual language of the scene. The djed pillar represents stability. No wires have been found. No generator has been excavated. No electrical network has been discovered beneath Dendera. The carving does not provide reliable evidence for an ancient power system. But dismissing the scene as nothing more than imagination also misses the most interesting possibility. The relief may show a real ceremonial object built in the form of the myth. The priests may have possessed a crafted image of Harsomtus as a serpent emerging from a lotus. It may have been made from valuable materials, mounted on a ritual base, and carried during festivals. In that case, the hieroglyphs are not describing a machine. They are documenting the appearance and purpose of a sacred object that is now gone. The mystery is not that the pharaohs hid electricity. The mystery is that they constructed physical images of creation and locked them beneath the temple. Not everyone was allowed to see them because seeing them was part of the ritual. In Egyptian belief, images, names, and written words could participate in the reality they represented. A carved god was not merely an illustration. A written name helped preserve identity. A ritual scene could continue performing its purpose long after the priests had left. That helps explain why the crypt walls were decorated so carefully. An ordinary storeroom needs shelves and labels. These chambers contained complete religious scenes. The inscriptions identified the divine forms. The reliefs recreated the sacred objects. The walls transformed a hidden storage space into part of the temple's sacred world. Even in darkness, the images continued to exist. Even when nobody looked at them, the hieroglyphs continued to name the gods. The chamber itself became a protected copy of the vanished collection. Now, does this prove that the priests of Dendera possessed forbidden technology or secret knowledge lost to modern science? Probably not. The strongest archaeological explanation remains practical and religious. These chambers protected valuable ritual objects, sacred images, and ceremonial equipment. Their hidden entrances reduced the risk of theft. Their restricted position reflected the hierarchy of temple worship. But that does not make them ordinary. The temple functioned almost like a machine built from architecture and belief. Walls controlled movement. Darkness controlled visibility. Inscriptions controlled meaning. The calendar controlled timing, priests controlled access, and the pharaoh stood above the entire system. Temple walls repeatedly show the ruler making offerings before the gods. In everyday reality, priests carried out most regular ceremonies. But the imagery presented the king as the necessary link between the divine and human worlds. The message was political as well as religious. The gods maintained Egypt. The pharaoh served the gods. Therefore, the pharaoh maintained the order of Egypt. The hidden sacred collection helped make that claim visible. To control the temple was to control the divine image, the festival calendar, the sacred objects, the priesthood, and the moment when the public was allowed to witness the god. The people could see the finished revelation. They could not see the preparation beneath it. That is the final clue. The secrecy did not mean the ritual was fake. The secrecy was what gave the ritual its power. Today, access to many ancient underground spaces remains restricted, but for very different reasons. The crypts are narrow and vulnerable. Their carved surfaces have survived for nearly 2,000 years. Heat, moisture, touching, dust, and large crowds can damage them. Following restoration, 3 crypts at Dendera were opened to visitors in 2020. Others remain inaccessible or unsuitable for ordinary public entry. That modern restriction has encouraged claims that authorities are hiding what lies inside. There is no need for that explanation. Preservation and safety are enough, but the result is strangely familiar. In ancient times, the chambers were controlled by priesthood, purity, and rank. Today, they are controlled by archaeology, conservation, and physical risk. The reason changed. The darkness remained. Beneath the temple of Hathor, carved serpents still rise from stone lotuses. Gods still stand beside ceremonial objects that disappeared centuries ago. Hieroglyphs still name sacred forms once carried into the light and then returned below. The pharaohs did hide something beneath the temple. They hid the bodies through which the gods entered their world. They hid the objects that gave their ceremonies authority, and they hid the preparation behind the miracle shown to the public. The walls never say that a machine was buried there. They reveal something far more human. Power depends on what people are allowed to see and on what must remain in darkness. The sacred collection is gone. The priests are gone. But beneath Dendera, the stone inventory is still waiting. And the next investigation is waiting on screen now.